the United States says Israel and Syria have agreed on steps to end days of sectarian fighting in southern Syria. This comes after Israel carried out airstrikes on Syria's capital, Damascus, hitting targets including the defense ministry. Authorities said 3 people were killed and more than a dozen injured. Israel intervened on behalf of Syria's Druze minority after clashes between Druze factions, Bedouin tribes and Syrian government forces.
Footage from a live broadcast shows an Israeli airstrike hitting the Syrian army headquarters in the heart of Damascus. The building, which houses the defense ministry, was significantly damaged in the attacks.
There were several martyrs and injured. Of course there were some injured civilians because the ministry's building is surrounded by civilian buildings.
The Israeli army has released footage saying it also struck what it called a military target near the presidential palace in the Syrian capital. The display of force came after violence intensified on the streets of Suweda in southern Syria. Syrian government troops were deployed to the area to deal with deadly unrest between the Druze religious minority and Bedouin tribes. But instead of bringing calm, witnesses say the government forces have been involved in attacks on Druze civilians and fighters, and the death toll keeps climbing. Israel has been pressured to intervene by its own significant Druze minority. It says that its strikes on Syria are aimed at defending the Druze community there and maintaining a buffer zone between the two countries.
Right, Giorgio Cafiero is a Middle East analyst and the CEO and founder of Gulf State Analytics. It's great to have you on DW. Secretary of State Marco Rubio of the US says all parties have agreed on steps to end the clashes in Syria. Do we have any more details on what those steps actually are?
Yeah, thanks for having me back on your network. You know, I am not privy to this information. I do not know all the details. My understanding is that in sort of broad general terms, the specifics entail support for stability in Syria and support for Syria's sovereignty, albeit with the central government in Damascus respecting the culture and the rights of various minority groups, including the Druze and the Kurds in the country. But more specifics, I'm not entirely sure about at this point.
Yeah, we will get more details, I suppose, in the coming days, perhaps. How likely, though, is this to draw a bit of a line under the latest eruption of violence in southern Syria and also to stop Israel's attacks on Syria?
Good question. I think, obviously, when it comes to the interest in preserving Syria's territorial integrity, the territorial dignity of Syria, these ceasefires are good news. These are positive developments. It's going to be important for the Druze community, as well as the relatively new government in Damascus, to try to find a way to coexist within the Syrian nation state. However, we need to keep in mind that Israel does not want to see Syria remain united as a nation state. Israel's interest is in balkanizing and fragmenting Syria and doing everything that Tel Aviv can do to exploit real tensions that exist between the Islamist government that came to power after the Assad government fell and different communities, the Druze, the Alawites, the Kurds, so on and so forth. Israel wants to see Syria divided. This will play into Israel's agenda of asserting more and more domination, asserting dominance throughout the Middle East. So I have no doubt that Israel is going to continue its military interventions in Syria unless the United States would rein Israel in. And right now, I do not see that happening.
So Israel, though, says that its goal is to sort of ensure that southern Syria remains demilitarized. That's what they say. And that has been part of the agreements that have existed in that part of the world. It also says that it had said that it wanted to reestablish diplomatic relations with Syria and a sort of normalization. How do you see that process?
Well, just to be clear, Israel does not want any Syrian military forces south of the capital. It's as if Israel gets to dictate where the Syrian military can be inside Syria. So again, this goes to an important point here, is that Israel wants to do whatever it can to see to it that al-Shara's government fails to consolidate its control over Syria. They want the government to fail in that sense, as this very delicate and fragile political transition continues to unfold in Syria about half a year after the Assad regime was collapsed. Now, when it comes to this issue of normalizing with Syria, this is very, very interesting. The United States is very committed to trying to bring Syria into the normalization camp. Obviously, in light of these recent developments, this is an increasingly complicated and delicate issue. It's tough to imagine the two countries having some sort of real peace. But I think the strategy on the part of the Trump administration is to basically cajole Syria into the Israeli normalization camp, telling Damascus that the U.S. will rein Israel in if the new government in Syria agrees to normalize with Israel. So I think the United States, while certainly frustrated with some aspects of what Israel's doing, is going to try to be opportunistic about these recent clashes in Syria, again, with the aim being of bringing Syria into the normalization camp.
Giorgio, just quickly, the Syrian government is obviously trying to sort of set itself up. It sent its troops down there to try and prevent the sectarian clashes. What should the new Syrian government do?
Well, there's no denying that recently, and then also going back a few months to March, there have been some very ugly episodes of gruesome sectarian killing. My advice to the Syrian government would be to actually make good on its words about being accountable and investigating these acts of sectarian violence, and to try to demonstrate to the different minority communities in the country that people who are behind these hateful killing sprees are held accountable. It's going to be difficult, but also very important for al-Shara's government to earn the trust of communities all over Syria, including some which are not at all supportive of the ideology of the relatively new government in Syria. It's a very, very difficult task, but I think that's what will be necessary for national unity and reconciliation in Syria. But again, I repeat, Israel is going to do everything it can to try to exploit these tensions and prevent Syria from achieving national unity and preventing the Syrian state from remaining intact.
Giorgio Cafiero, thank you so much for joining us on DW.
Thank you.